do is go online. And you
Well, we are online now. Welcome, everybody. Another fun Drum Talk TV interview. How do I know it's going to be fun? Well, any band that would put the name Dixie in it, any band that would put the name Dregs in it, you know we're going to have some fun. I'm Dan Shinder, host of Drum Talk TV, and I'm here in Globe, Arizona. I live here, and I don't even know where that is. And Andy, the bass player of Dixie Dregs, in case you've been under a rock for 40 years, is in Scottsdale, Arizona. And Rod is on Long Island. So we got East Coast and almost West Coast, but most importantly, the powerhouse rhythm section of Dixie Dregs, here to talk about, amongst other things, this awesome tour that you have coming together 6 years after your reunion tour before. Let's start with this. The history of Dixie Dregs, the Dregs, goes back so far. Did you ever think you'd be years old and still doing this, let alone doing this music, let alone doing it together?
You know what? As I was and then Andy, you took. I was pacing up and down my hallway this morning, thinking about this interview, and I was thinking about when did Andy and I actually meet, and it's coming up on, if not already, 50 years.
Wow! You said 15, right?
Yeah.
Wow! Crazy. So
yeah, it's crazy, and I remember that. I remember meeting Rod and Alan, and of course I met Steve in high school, which makes it just really bizarre because, you know, in my mind I can still see us as kids, really, you know, and yet here we are. So it's pretty cool.
wow. So, not to call you out, but in what's the date? 1, 2, 3, 4. In 4 days, 5 days, 4 days, I'll be 61. So you guys are in your early 70s, right?
Yeah.
Wait.
Yeah.
Ooh, I'm getting out the knife.
No, it really is a testament to your credit that you're still doing this. I don't think you'd be doing it if it wasn't fun. You both have other successful things going on. We'll talk about that. What started this party now for this new tour? Fast forward from when you met about 50 years ago to what's happening now. What brought this up?
Yeah, well, personally, I never thought this would happen, but you know, I think Steve leaving Deep Purple, you know, and most people know the story of his wife and her cancer issues and you know, passing and everything. But prior to that, Deep Purple really consumed his musical life.
Yeah,
you know, pretty much. He would do things here and there where we could, and like we did that reunion tour 6 years ago. And as I said, I didn't ever think this would happen again. But you know, he became more free with his time, I think, and just kind of wanted to do it. And of course, we were all like, "Yeah, let's do it."
that's awesome. And everyone immediately was on board. Was there any draggers behind that had to be convinced for whatever reason?
Okay, so I'll tell a quick story on this because I talked to Steve Davidowski, who was our keyboard player on the Freefall album.
Yeah.
And I think I mentioned on the website, you know, our beloved Owski, because he's, you know, having him back in the group at that point in time was really a great thing. But he turns 81 this year. He's 10 years older than the rest of us.
Wow, really?
Yeah, and he's in great shape. But his basic concept was, you know, we're like, hey, if you want to do it, we want you, we love you, blah, blah, blah. And his basic thing was, yeah, I just don't want to suck. And so, you know, he gracefully said, hey, I'm just retired from touring. And then, you know, Rod said, well, hey, how about Jordan, my friend Jordan?
Right. Yeah, because you guys have been close for a long time, right, Rod?
Yeah, and Jordan and I met approximately 30 years ago.
Wow.
when the Dixie Dregs were touring, and we needed to find a keyboard player to fill in for our buddy T. Lavitz, who was the regular keyboard player for years.
Right.
And so how do you find somebody to fill in those shoes, right? So at the time, the violinist who was playing with us was Jerry Goodman from the Mahavishnu Orchestra. And he put in a call to, I believe, his manager, who at the time was also managing Jan Hammer,
Oh,
keyboard
wow.
in the Mahavishnu Orchestra. And his manager said, hey, Jan Hammer just came off a tour with Tony Williams and Fernando Sanders. And, you know, Jan is going through this phase where he really wants to be a guitarist and he's playing his strap-on synth. And they found a keyboard player, you know, to kind of stand or sit at his keyboard playing all of the parts while Jan could be out front with his strap-on keyboard. And they said it's a keyboard.
Thanks for qualifying keyboard, by the way.
Oh, yeah, my goodness. So Jerry Goodman's manager, I believe, sent him or us a copy of a solo record that Jordan had done.
Oh, nice.
This year or so. Now, Jordan was basically not a household name by any means. He was well known at NAMM shows as a demo guy for various synth companies. Everybody would flock to see his shows, but in terms of the public's eye, nobody knew the name Jordan Rudess. So we all listened to the CD and hands down said, this is the guy. And however many days or weeks later, there he was at the one rehearsal, the one day of rehearsals before we then played Fort Lauderdale at an Agora Ballroom, and he nailed it. And then the way he and I continued working on with our duo Rudess Morgenstein project was in that very first show, in the middle of it, the power to Steve's guitar rig, Jerry's violin rig, and Dave LaRue's bass rig went down. And as the crew frantically ran around trying to get power up and running, I looked at this guy who I had met not 24 hours earlier, and instead of stopping and having nothing going on the stage, he and I just kept jamming keyboards because they were direct in the PA system.
Yeah.
The drums, drums are acoustic, whatever. Yeah. And, it went on for several minutes and we had so much fun. The power came back on. We finished the show. But backstage after the show, that was the seed for the idea to do something as a duo.
That's awesome. I as you told that story, I flashed back to the first time I saw, and I honestly don't remember if it was in person or on video, which is weird. The two of you playing Tarkus together, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. That was at a NAMM show years ago.
Oh, that's right. He did an album called The Road Home where he chose 4 songs that were life-changing for him. So there was a Gentle Giant song, the ELP song Tarkus, Genesis, and the band that does just the same, Gentle Giant.
Yeah. I just interviewed 3 weeks ago John Weathers, the drummer for Gentle Giant, and a week later we had Derek Shulman on, which was just phenomenal, as I've been a fan for them, for years and years. And I could see Jordan's influences being influenced by them, of course. And Tarkus is just one of my favorite things to play and listen to. Let's, on that note, rewind even farther back. When the two of you met and started playing together, how did that go? What was that like? Did you say, let's just jam? Did you pick out songs to jam to? What was that like? And was it just the two of you, or did you jam with other players for the first time together?
Well, okay. So I think I can tell part of this story. Steve and I, as I mentioned, we're in high school. We had bands together, but then he went off to the University of Miami and I went off to Georgia State University in Atlanta. And in the summer, we sort of planned, Steve moved back to Augusta for a year, for a season. And we got back together and started playing. But at the end of that time in Augusta College, he said, we got to go down to Miami. There's amazing musicians down there. And he'd already met Rod and Alan and a bunch of other people in Miami. And so I was like, Yeah. Okay, great. And so I came down to Miami. Rod didn't know anything about me. I mean, I'll let him tell the story, but basically I just showed up there as Steve's bass player, I guess, kind of. I mean, how did he explain this to you, Rod?
You know what? It's just hitting me as you're speaking. So when this all came together with me playing with Steve, it happened when he and I were in a jazz improvisation class. He was one of a bunch of guitarists, and I was actually one of 2 or 3 piano players, because I wasn't sure if I maybe wanted to take a different course. I always loved the piano. And I was always admiring Steve because he was the one guy getting yelled at by the teacher all the time, because all of the other guitarists had fat hollow body Gibsons with all the treble off, and they were playing all the same licks from the Jerry Coker Patterns for Jazz book. And there was Steve playing this, like bastardized Fender Telecaster with a Stratocaster neck and Gibson frets and 4 pickups, and it had some twang to it. And he sounded anything but like a traditional jazz bebop guitar.
Yeah, he had a Frankenstein tool.
Yeah, so I was admiring him above everybody else. And one day he came over to me and said, "Hey, somebody told me you play the drums." I said, "Yeah, I'm a drummer. I actually play drums better than piano. Why? What's up?" And he said, "Well, I have this thing where, I have a band. We're playing my music. It's called the Rock Ensemble Number 2 as a class for a credit, as a performance class. But my drummer, whose name is Bart Yarnold, likes to surf, and he hurt himself surfing, and would you like to come fill in?" So that's how that all came together. So I went to the rehearsal of whatever this was going to be, and then the bass player was Hiram Bullock. Do you know the name?
Yeah.
Yeah, he was the original guitarist on the Letterman Show, and went on to have this fabulous career as an amazing guitarist. But he was playing bass for us, not for us. He was playing bass during that semester.
Yeah.
And then, I was so blown away hearing some of the Steve Morse compositions for the first time. Again, I didn't know Steve wrote music. So he was also totally over the top into Mahavishnu Orchestra and Frank Zappa music and Allman Brothers. So we were doing cover songs of those bands. But then I remember, him introducing one of his songs. And of the first few songs of his that I learned were Country House Shuffle, The Odyssey, The Great Spectacular, but also in a jazz composition class, we had to write music based on the theory we were learning. And the song that eventually became What If, which is actually the title of our second album, was called Slow Modal, because the assignment was to write a song using one of the modes.
Wow, what a trip.
So I was learning some of those songs and really felt like I had died and gone to heaven, because his music touched me in the deepest place that music can touch a soul, right? And so then we said goodbye, I guess, for the semester. And then when we regrouped, there was Andy, right? So it was like, "Hey, who's this guy?" "Oh, Andy's my friend from Augusta. We met in high school, and we've been playing together for years." And so Andy is the bass player. So I was like, "Wow, cool. Nice to meet you. Here we go."
So you mentioned thanks for sharing that story. It's such a great story. And you mentioned how Steve's original compositions really touched your musical soul. What was the biggest thread in that resonance? Was it because you were influenced by those same bands, or just had the same musical horizons in your sight? What was it that was the sameness of you two?
I think a huge part of it was the fact that I was completely obsessed at the time with the Mahavishnu Orchestra. And whatever it is about that music that moved me, those same elements seemed to be a part of Steve's compositions and the way he wrote. But his music tended to even be somewhat more melodic. And then I think the general concept of the Dixie Dregs is to play musician music that takes into account an audience who many are not musicians,
Right.
and musicians that'll stop ringing in a sec.
That's okay. Yeah, if it's for me, I'm not here.
That play music that does not have vocals or lyrics,
Right.
can tend to sometimes become a little self-indulgent, where it's so much more about just the musicians doing their thing and not taking into account that you have a listening audience. And so great care goes into Steve's composition, so that when a verse comes back, there's going to be some other element or elements in it, so that it's not just like in a vocal song, everything is going to be the same except the lyrics will be different.
Right.
And so the songs are also generally not long in length, and the solos are not long and drawn out, which, fusion type musicians and music can tend to drift that way. So
Yeah.
So it's more of a controlled approach of this beautiful melodic harmonic music.
Yeah, it's like he took the concept of that, being able to exercise that self-indulgence, but put it within the framework and the context of more commercial type of blueprint, if you will. It sounds like, being that the late.
I think it was a learned skill too, because we all were obsessed with Mahavishnu. And in fact, I used to claim we were a Mahavishnu cover band. We learned pretty much most of the tunes on Intermounting Flame and Birds of Fire. But one thing about with Steve is we did a lot of live playing. And when we moved to Augusta and started the band for real, we did a lot of live playing. And I think he, more than anyone, was really tuned to the audience response, and he wanted people to love his music. So we had things that we would try, and if they didn't work with the audience, they would just kind of die and go away, And so I think it's a learned skill for him to, to be in consonance with his own sensibilities about music, but also with the idea of delivering it to people.
Yeah.
Here, but what do you think, Rod?
It's being very attuned, to be able to think like that. And Andy, some of your earlier influences, I guess, are pretty much the same. And I know you're a Mahavishnu fan because I met you at the first Billy Cobham Art of the Rhythm section event that I helped produce and did a documentary around. And it's funny for those who haven't seen that or don't know. There's like a big sort of L-shaped table set up, and we were on a big stage at Mesa Art Center, and everybody sat at these tables, and I was there with a couple of my other camera people, all set up, 3 drum sets, Billy's big drum set, other gear. And the first thing is Dom Famularo co-hosted it, and we went around the table, everyone said who they were, and I kept looking at Andy thinking, guy, I think I know that guy, I know who he is, and I'm trying to place it. And when it got to you, said, my name's Andy West, and I've played in a band called Dixie Dregs. I'm like but what was so cool is, like everyone else, you were there to learn. And I'd like you to talk about that a little bit, because how many of us, right, have seen musicians that get to a point and they stop learning, or they stop listening to new things, and they stop trying new things. And I admire very much the fact with both of you, Rod playing in Winger, but playing in Dixie Dregs, they're just worlds apart. To be a constant learner, to say it would help someone's musicality is kind of a dumb platitude. But can you talk about that and what your personal, for each of you, journey has been as musicians to always be looking forward and not just backward?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's a challenging question and topic, because it's sort of freeform. In other words, I found myself really tuned to be a bass player in the Dixie Dregs, and so when the band sort of broke up the first time, it was a struggle for me to go out and try and find music that I enjoyed playing, honestly. And, I've written stuff on my own that no one wants to hear, but I enjoy doing it, and that kind of thing. And so being uncomfortable, I mean, it's sort of uncomfortable in a situation to say, have had a career in one way and then go into and try to do a different thing. But I learned a long time ago that I'm not a journeyman bass player. In other words, I can't just play any kind of thing. For me, I don't want to frame it this way, but it's a very personal kind of thing. I have to feel like I want to be playing music. It's not like I feel like I'm doing a job and I want to do the job perfectly. That was my programming career. That was my computer career. I want to do this thing very technically perfectly. And that's where you take pride in workmanship and all that kind of stuff. Right. But in music, I was like, I don't really like this. So, I'm not going to do it.
And that's fair. Yeah. Music should be something we enjoy doing. That's why I dropped out of marching band in high school out of the first 2 months, because it wasn't fun for me. And I so admire people that have done that and built up incredible chops, but the director wasn't fun. I never saw him smile. The whole thing was just way too regimented for me. Whereas I was just like this and it was like this, so I get that. And it should be fun,
Yeah. Well, I mean, the disadvantage of that kind of thinking is, you have to make a living. And so, and when the band was together and we were surviving, financially, it was fine. But then when it's like, I don't like that. I don't like that. I don't like that. Oh, gee, I need to make some money, then software kind of comes in, and that was a good savior for me. And it enabled me to sort of explore a lot of different things. So the thing with the drum seminar thing, I just thought it would be a really cool opportunity to just flow into it and see what it was. And Rick Firabracci, I forget how to pronounce his last name. The bass
Firabracci, that was it. Yeah.
An amazing bass player. So, out of that, I just kind of got exposed to him and his way of thinking and the way he plays. And, he's a fusion monster.
Yeah.
And recently did that tour with Keneally and Jonathan Mover and those guys, the worst name in the universe, Project.
Yeah. Yeah.
But a great band, doing classic prog tunes. So anyhow, you never know where stuff is going to go.
Blood, Sweat, and Tears as his day job, so he's got quite a spectrum of music there. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyways, I don't know if that answers your question or gives you a perspective on it, but.
Yeah, absolutely. And Rod, how about you? You obviously have different a diversity in what you like to play. If we look at, again, just different ends of the spectrum in most ways between Winger and Dixie Dregs. Talk about how you have arrived at what's up here with what you choose to do, like to do, and want to learn more about.
Yeah, I grew up in a family that loved music, so music was actually playing in the house much of the time, and my mom played in a local orchestra, a mandolin orchestra. She played guitar, and so then I started noodling on her guitar. But my parents loved folk music, so we would go to folk music concerts, and they would take us to Broadway shows, and then to see a symphony. And whereas I naturally gravitated towards the rock thing when I was a teenager, I had all those other influences inside me, and there were aspects of everything that I really, really liked. I think I also get bored easily, and so if I hear something that is, say, crazy musician fusion, I don't want to just keep listening to that. Please put on Joni Mitchell or singer-songwriter before bringing me back to the super technical, over-the-top kind of playing. So I've always loved everything. And then, the Dregs was, both Andy's and my first professional foray into the real world. So, we kind of got our feet wet playing this instrumental, very different kind of music that you can't really dance to, and that was not really the right thing to be trying to get a record deal with in the heat of the disco craze.
Yeah.
And door after door was slammed in our face, but it kind of made our quest that much stronger to kind of prove to whoever and ourselves, we're going to get a record deal and make this happen, right? But when the band broke up until further notice, I continued playing with Steve Morse in a trio called the Steve Morse Band.
Mm-hmm.
And we did 2 records, and then he got a phone call from someone in the group Kansas to see if he'd be interested in joining them. They're reforming. And so I was faced with my first uh-oh moment, like, oh my goodness, I'm out of college 11 years. Everything's been pretty good, but now I'm jobless. What do you do? So I was living in Atlanta, Georgia, and my wife, Michelle, and I were living in Atlanta, Georgia, and she said, why don't you go up to New York? I don't want to go to New York with you. I'll stay in the house in Atlanta. You go to New York and see what you can find. But my goal was not to find another musician instrumental band. It's like, been there, done that.
Right.
Wouldn't it be nice to try something different? Maybe go back to my roots, my early roots of the Beatles, and then all the bands that followed. And it was a very interesting year to a year and a half, to say the least. I mean, it was, in some ways frightening, because I didn't know. Nobody knows if the next thing is ever going to present itself.
That's right.
Right. And I had experience after experience, jamming with different musicians, getting to be able to go on different auditions because I had a name. And most musicians, when they heard you playing the Dixie Dregs, got excited.
Yeah.
Maybe not the average music buyer that just buys what's on the radio, but most musicians knew of the band.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
So all doors were open for me. So I'd go on all these auditions and then not get the audition.
Yeah.
And like one it's funny now, it wasn't funny then, through the last Steve Morse Band manager, whose name is Larry Mazer, who went on to manage Cinderella and Kiss, and he's still managing, doing very, very well. He called me and said, Rod, I set up an audition for you with Joe Lynn Turner, the singer who sometimes with Deep Purple, his own thing. So I drove out to New Jersey, spent the day with Joe and his band. A couple days later, Larry called me up and said, Rod, what happened? I went, what do you mean? He goes, Joe told me you're the worst drummer he's ever heard in his life. So
that's hilarious.
That didn't feel all that good. I mean, I didn't feel particularly great, but I guess I made an impression on him. But there's a happy ending to that story, where like a couple of years later, when Winger was on MTV every 20 minutes and our album, was like, didn't quite hit 2 million sales, but it was getting close. Yeah. I ran into Joe.
Oh, how'd that go?
And he said, touche,
Good for him.
It was very nice.
That's great. I want to chime in here for some people watching. We got Julian in Bulgaria. Thanks for tuning in. Agnes Chow, my friend Agnes, is out near Andy. If you wake up in the morning and her house is teepeed, it was Agnes in Scottsdale.
Okay.
But she always uses the Ultra Soft. And Jeff Scott says, hi, Rod. I'll put this one on screen. This one says, hi, Rod. I saw one of your drum clinics at Guitar Center in Santa Ana. That's in California, for those who don't know. Over 30 years ago. Amazing stuff. Are you still using those blue signature drumsticks that leave blue scuff marks on the drum? Oh, wow.
The answer is no, because they turned everything blue. But I saved, one pair because I think they are the coolest looking sticks ever made.
Oh, who are they by? Are these
they were
inches?
Vic Firth.
Vic Firth. Okay.
They were the same color as the drum set from that second Winger album tour.
Yeah. Yeah. How long did it take to get used to doing that 4/4 thing?
Oh my goodness. So, right. So to very quickly finish that story.
Yeah.
And so, not wanting to just do another fusion instrumental kind of thing. One event led to another, and then it's for another time to tell the story. But so I met Kip and Reb, and then they were doing demos and getting rejected over and over, and they threw my name on the list of the 20, 30 New York drummers that go to every cattle call audition. But Reb Beach, the lead guitarist in Winger, he was a major Dixie Dregs Steve Morse fan, and he was going, Kip, you don't know who this guy is, and Kip's like, I'm sorry, I don't know who you are. But because of that, they set up a jam hang a couple days later, and when Kip came up to the drums and started pumping eighth notes, junk, 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 I played what I thought is the proper beat to play for it, which is what I call tried and true kick snare pattern number 1. Kick, snare, kick, snare, kick, snare, with a sloshy hi-hat.
Cool.
And hitting as hard as I could hit, uncomfortably hard. And after about 15 seconds, Kip stopped and he said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm playing what I think is appropriate for the bass line you're playing." And he said, "Great, that's great. I see you can hit hard and play simple. Reb said you could do crazy stuff." And then he said, "Lose me. Do the stuff you do in that band, your Dixie Chicks or whatever band,
The Dixie Chicks band or whatever the heck that was.
So he said, do the stuff that Reb's telling me, rock drummers don't do." I went, "You really?" "I'm intentionally not doing it because I don't want to kind of scare you away. I didn't think this is anything that you'd be looking for." And man, did we have a good time. And it was there and then that I knew that Kip Winger is a seasoned musician. I mean, he's gone on. He's now been embraced by the classical music world and has his pieces being played by some of the, highest rated orchestras around the world. But,
wow.
But it was doing, the polyrhythmic, playing over the bar line, ghost stroking, all the kinds of things that, busy style drummers like to do.
Yeah.
It was as much those things that got me the gig in the band as the hitting hard and keeping it simple. So, he said, "Look, the way you get a record deal is by having some elements that fit right in that Def Leppard, Bon Jovi, Poison, Kiss thing." But he said, "I'm looking for ways that Winger can not only just do that, but do things that none of those other bands have." I went, "Wow, that's awesome."
That's cool.
Yeah.
That's cool. Awesome. Thank you both for sharing all that. Let's talk about the upcoming tour. Without giving away anything you don't want to give away, but what can you give some people an idea of what to expect without, showing the set list, but just kind of some teaser info?
Well, I don't think it's so bad to talk about tunes. I mean, we did a set of tunes 6 years ago, and we've got about eight or so different ones, maybe 9 or 10. I'm not sure. Different things we're kind of throwing in the mix. There's stuff that is sort of iconic Dregs music that we all feel like we should play, like Cruise Control and Country House Shuffle and things like this.
Yeah.
It's a challenge. I mean, we have to practice this stuff. We've had 3 practices so far, and we've got another one right before the tour where we're going to get it together. And it's just fun. One thing I think your listeners might be tuned into, Rod and I, there's always little tiny things in the song that are, oh, for some reason I turned off my camera. There's always, let's see, how do I do this? All right. Well, I don't know. It's not a cat face.
30 years in cat.
My finger touched something.
There we go.
There's always little parts in the song where, like, if we're just doing a straight thing, Rod will just do a kick, and I kick on the bass too, and we just look at each other and smile. It's like a fun thing, you know. And I think many songs have those moments in them. And so for the Dregs, part of what we do is we communicate with each other on stage, you know. And it's not through improvisation so much as it is just the vibe and playing the music. But there's those little things that are pretty cool. So people might look for that if they care.
That's cool.
And with the bass in particular, you know, the approach in the music is kind of orchestral. And so I was thinking a lot about this with this interview coming up. So, you know, Andy will play traditional bass throughout the music, but then he will be doubling certain violin lines or doubling a guitar riff or doubling a guitar melody or the keyboards. And so so the bass is playing like a much more involved role than in a traditional sense. You know, it's like wearing different hats. And and then with the drumming, you know, I think it's fair to say with this kind of music, a lot of the time, all of the other instrumentalists have to be playing specific notes, because if you don't play those notes, then it's not the right melody, especially if Andy and Alan on the violin are playing a line together. But as a drummer, you're given a lot more free rein as long as you kind of are catching the feel in the way that everybody likes. But like if you hit this drum instead of this drum, or you play a different rhythm, nobody turns around and goes, hey, that's not the part. I think as drummers, Dan, like we're fortunate and lucky in ways that the other guys, they're put more to the test, you know?
Yeah, totally. I agree. And I know that people are excited about this because they've been, you know, talking about it. I was a little surprised, unless I didn't see that there's a second page to the tour schedule. Is there nothing other than out east? Is that correct? Did I only see
the third leg is being put together now?
Okay, great. So you'll come out to the west, southwest at least? Arizona, Nevada, California.
100% sure about that.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. Are you kidding me? We're putting in too much time relearning all this music. You know.
And how's that coming along? Like, how's that sounding? Is it sounding like it did, or is it sounding like it did, but with the now you and maybe some modernized gear or are you trying to make some modernized gear sound like old gear, or are you using old? Like, how does the whole thing working as far as the playing and the way the band sounds, but also with the gear? Are you using a lot of old type stuff that you used to, or more modern stuff?
Well, I can't speak for drums, but I mean, for the rest of us, it's really the same kind of thing. I mean, I've always had just a very mid-range, because of the pick and because of the stuff Rod was talking about, where they're melodic lines. They're not just sort of like bass grooves, you know?
Yeah.
I've always used a very clear tone. And so, yeah, there's new gear that does it slightly better and smaller.
Smaller is good when it comes to schlepping gear.
Yeah, you know, and Steve has honed his tone, you know, for forever, you know, and he's been using the same thing the last 25 years. I don't think he's got anything new in there, because he likes what it is, you know, and it works for him. And with violin, it's just, you know, Alan has a very, you know, he's classical trained, and he's, you know, but he's listened to a lot of music. So his sound, when I listen to like when I'm playing along with the songs, practicing these things, and I hear his violin, it sounds like that now, you know, and it's, he's got a real sweet tone to his the way that he plays, and so yeah, so it's not like a lot of new kind of sounds that are there. It's more just like, okay, how do we articulate it? How do we make it clear? I think it'll sound better because sound systems are just generally way better than they used to be, you know?
I think the one element that will be different in terms of this part of the conversation is the addition of Jordan Rudess.
Right.
Only because, you know, Jordan's been on top of sound technology since it started. He's a real fan of it. Our buddy Steve Davidowski really at heart is a jazz pianist, you know, and in a perfect world for him, he'd never have to learn a part to play in anything. He just wants to sit out in nature, either with his piccolo or his soprano sax, or if he could have a grand piano in the woods, he would just sit and listen to the birds and the other animals and react to it. That's his greatest pleasure. Jordan, you know, is a synthesist. You know, he's a classically trained pianist, but you know, he was just I had dinner with him the other night because he's not far from me writing and recording the new Dream Theater album. You know? So I mean, his head's exploding because he spends all day with those guys. And then when I got together with him on Sunday night, he's asking me all these questions about the Dregs songs, you know, like adding up all those notes. But so, you know, he's got everything scored out because he can read Chopin, like just put anything in front of him and his fingers just start flying. But so now he's in the process of putting the sounds together for each of the songs. And, you know, so that's a whole other.
Actually, that is going to be really different, I think, on this tour. It's going to make a huge difference because he's so tuned in to the sounds. Whereas, again, like Rod said, it's just Davidowski's approach is different. You know, it's like, okay, a piano sound, an organ sound, and some kind of synthesizer thing.
Yeah.
You know, whereas with Jordan, it's like, okay, do we want this? Do we want this kind of attack? You know, I mean, he's very tuned in. So I think the sound will be much sort of more appropriately full. It'll be different. And plus, we're all anxious to see how he fits inside the band, because everyone gets solo stuff, especially the keyboards and guitar. There's solo sections. So it's not like, you know, we're expecting to duplicate those aspects. In fact, we expect it to be very different. So that will be different. It'll be cool.
Because Rod sent me a cassette tape of this 22-minute drum solo he's got planned, which was really cool. You know, I saw this video
only, by the way, so you know.
I saw this video the other day. I forgot about until you just mentioned Jordan again, who I was going to bring up. I'm sure you've seen it. He's playing guitar by tapping with the neck on his left hand, and he's playing the same thing on a keyboard in unison at the same time. And that was like crazy. That was just, and it wasn't like simple stuff. It was crazy runs, and he's just doing it at the same time. That was wild. I got to look that up again. That blew my mind. I've never seen anybody do that.
Yeah, he's a one of a kind for sure. And you know what the best part of it is, because I know him very well, you know, however many years ago it is now that he and I worked on that Rudess Morgenstein project recording, which we put out in 1997.
Wow.
We were spending morning till night together, day after day after day after day. He is a sweet human being. He's a very soft, nice person. I love hanging out with him.
That's cool.
And so that's really an added plus to the whole thing. And he delivers the goods. I mean, there's nobody like him.
That's awesome. When was the last time either of you were on the road in a tour situation? Has it been a while?
For me, 3 weeks ago, I was on the Monsters of Rock cruise. With Winger. So it is funny going, yeah, woo, rock on. You know, now it's more like, you know, smoking the pipe, like,
right,
in the Dregs mode, professor stuff.
That's so funny. How about you, Andy? It's been a while.
Well, the last time was the Dregs, and as a matter of fact, when we talked about doing this again, it's like, okay, for Alan Sloan, we got to commend him too, because he has a full-time medical practice that he works, and yet I talked to him last night. I called him up. It was about 10 o'clock his time, and when he picked up the phone, there was the Dregs in the background. He's practicing, so he works all day and practices at night.
That's cool.
But yeah, for me, I'm not a touring musician anymore. So it's I was like, guys, we need to practice this because I don't know what it's like to play live. It's part of my genetic makeup, but it's not like with Rod and Steve, where it's so ingrained.
Yeah. Well, being that it's been, I know it's only been like maybe 6 years. That doesn't sound like that long when you look at it this way. That one of the things to watch out for, Andy, is that most of the hotels now have the type of not regular window glass, but if you try to throw a TV out the window, it just bounces right back into the room. So
yeah, okay, I'll be aware of that. But fortunately, I haven't had to worry about
more
that.
advances in technology driven by the music industry.
Yeah.
So I want to ask you both something that you'll answer, individually, of course. This is what I love closing interviews with, and it's called, in this case, the Andy West and Rod Morgenstein Fun Fact segment. And for each of you, please answer, what do you like to do when you're completely outside of the world of music? You're not writing, you're not recording, you're not rehearsing, you're not touring, you're not tuning drums, restringing a bass, or anything like that. What do you like to do outside of your musical life? And Rod, we will talk about, and for each of you, anything else that you want to promote, because I know Rod has something aside from music, but not related to work. What do you like to do?
I'll start with that, because the only other thing I do is snowboarding, which I love to snowboard. And
wow.
Yeah, and this year, and we have a mountain here in Flagstaff, which is great. And as a matter of fact, the last 2 weeks they've had amazing snow up there. But I've been at home woodshedding. So this year, my snowboarding took a huge backseat compared to every year, which I look forward to it. And that's kind of a cool thing. I mean, and when you're in all your snowboarding gear, unless you're shuffling around and looking very stiff, people don't know anything about you, So I get on the lifts and I'm talking to people like we're just snowboarders, and every now and again, someone will see my gray beard and the topic of age will come up. It's like 71. I want to be like you, kind of thing.
That's cool. That sounds like a great release, a great getaway. How about you, Rod?
It's interesting because most of my everything is music related, but in the middle of COVID, or towards the end of 2020, I decided with my home that I want to put my stamp on it. My wife, Michelle, was an amazing interior designer, not through schooling, but just through the eyes that she had. And, like I was the kind of guy, before really understanding how she thought about these kinds of things, that would have shag rugs and velvet Elvis paintings and the dogs with the big eyes. Like, I didn't know anything. And so, I love my home, and everywhere that I look, I can see Michelle, and it would bring me back to all the trials and tribulations of getting a room to that point. So I decided, you know what, room by room and inside and outside, I'm going to transform some of it to what my vision is. So whereas Michelle's vision was all like, antique driven, country French and those kinds of things, I'm still stuck in the 60s. So you'll walk around some of my place and go, oh my God, like, is Andy Warhol right around the corner? Like really great purples, black, blues, red. And just like one thing that I think I did that most homes don't have, I don't want to make this boring, so very fast. When we bought this house 30 some odd years ago, it had an above ground pool, which Michelle immediately wanted to take down because like above ground pool, I don't want that. And so we never went in it unless after we bought the heater, we could get it to like 92 degrees because both of us hated cold water. But we loved going to the beach and laying in the sand.
Yeah.
Right. So I decided about a couple of years ago, I took down the pool and I now have my own beach or shower. I built a beach, right? And this will really be the first summer, although I'm going to be gone most of it, with Winger and the Dixie Dregs, where, you know, first when the landscaper brought over all the sand and left, I went, I'm sorry, this is not true beach, fine sand. Take it away. I want a beach, you know. And then I wanted the shower built like kind of like an Asian wood motif. And
yeah.
So anyway, I know it sounds silly and
it doesn't,
but it's like I've really gotten into interior design, and I've had stuff going on in my house over the course of the past 3 years, and I'm really happy with everything that I've done.
That's great. That's awesome. And you have something new to promote outside of music, right?
Yeah. Thank you for asking. So, I'm a drummer. You're a drummer. Every drummer has issues now and then, right? And so,
wait, are we talking about up here or with gear?
With gear. Yeah.
I tell people I'm married to a therapist. It's great for me, not so good for her.
That's great. So for probably 30 or more years, because of these handful of things that go wrong with a drum set, I've had this idea, and it started with, wouldn't it be great if there could just be like a drummer's survival toolkit, you know, like you hand tighten the wing nut on your hi-hat cymbal as tight as you can, and then as you play the top cymbal, it keeps moving away. So then what do? Now you take your 2 drumsticks and you put them around it, and all this kind of stuff, you know. And so initially it just started with, okay, so one tool should just be a pair of pliers, but there's problems with pliers where you could lop off one end of the wing nut and whatever. And so I partnered up with a friend of mine who I met when Michelle and I first moved back to New York 30-something years ago. He started flying from Detroit, Michigan to New York City to study with me at the Drummers Collective. And we became friends. But he went into business when he gave it his shot in music and saw, oh my God, it's such a crapshoot, not necessarily based on the amount of talent or lack of. And he went into business, and we've stayed in touch. And then about 4 years ago, he came to a Winger show. We went to dinner one night, and I kind of sounded him on this idea that I've had it for 30-something years.
Wow.
And after all that, the decision was made, you know what? We're going to start a tool company, but we're going to design one-of-a-kind tools, not pliers and wrenches. And so after so many years of, you know, labored attempts of prototypes, we finally have, I don't know if you can see this, so it's called the wing thing.
Oh, yeah.
And, you know, if I had a stand in front of me, I could show you how, you know, whether you're trying to loosen a wing nut from a stand that you haven't loosened in a year or 5, and you can't do it by hand. So you just put this over the wing nut and gently turn it, and it loosens it. Or if you want to crank it. And so,
wow.
So the name, originally the company had a company name, and then about a year ago, my partner, my friend Jim Meridian, he said, Rod, I want you to consider this. Give it some thought. I know you're not this kind of person because you're very like low key. You don't really like to promote yourself. I think we should call, you know, the company Morgenstein. And I went, no, can't do that, you know. And I thought about it because he said, Rod, there's like instant recognition for some drummers when they see your name, and it'll pique their interest. And so anyway, so the wing thing is the first tool I've been getting in the hands of some of my, drumming buddies who really are loving it. And now they're starting to make videos for me that'll start popping up. And if anybody's interested in just reading about the tool, they can go to morgensteintool.com.
Cool. Steve will put that in the chat. Morgensteintool.com. What do they retail for, Rod?
I believe $59.
Oh, I'm sorry. We got to go. No, I'm kidding.
All right.
Now that's awesome. I'm thinking of the two hardest spots on my big obnoxious prog kit that are hard, not only hard to do what you're saying, it's the stand that holds my two suspended floor toms, a 16 and an 18. And because of the, it's a tripod stand, not a rack. And because of the cymbal stands that are right up against it, it's also really hard to get to without like moving a bunch of stuff. And so I can totally see the value of that. I'll buy one. Send me a link. I'll buy one.
We'll talk.
And I'll make videos. Okay, cool.
Yes. What was I saying? So on that site, on the morgensteintool.com site, there's a list of a bunch of drum shops who at the moment are carrying it.
Awesome. Thank you both so much for taking time ahead of this fabulous tour. I can't wait to see the dates in the future that will be unfolded, unpacked for the Southwest, the West Coast. I know there's people all over the country. And that's another thing. Are you going outside the US? Are you going to see how this goes first? Do you have time? Do you have interest? Are you allowed to travel that far away from home? What's happening?
I think for this chunk of time, it's all US.
Okay.
I think.
Cool. Interesting.
But we will never say never, because like Andy said a little while ago,
right.
Neither of us thought we were going to do another Dixie Dregs show ever. And here we are.
Right. And next thing you know, you'll be going to other countries. There'll be the big bundle where you get the DVD, the lunchbox, and the beach towel, and it'll be a whole big thing. Great. Hang on the line with me, please, for just a moment after we say goodbye. And folks, thank you so much for following what we do here on Drum Talk TV, and lots of other stuff coming up over the next 2 months. We've got a lot of different things booked, and check out our membership site at www.drumtalktvbrilliance.com. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Dan.